Welcome 5th grade social studies scholars to another Passport to Social Studies video. My name is Mr. Giordano and I will be your teacher for today's lesson. Today we will be continuing with our Unit 3 United States case study topic and our Day 4 lesson. The focus for today's lesson is the complex histories of La Malinche and Pocahontas. Our focus question is, how does a country's culture influence the way it interprets its history? And our learning objective is to analyze, compare, and contrast two female historical figures important to the history of the United States and Mexico. Today, we will be analyzing an image of La Malinche using the Image Analysis Worksheet. This is part of your independent classwork for today's lesson. You can find additional information regarding the images and where they are located in your student workbook below. The first image we'll be taking a look at is The Baptism of Pocahontas by John Gadsby Chapman, and it is located on your student workbook page 74. And you can flip to the image analysis sheet in your student workbook on page 75. The second image is La Malinche, which can be found on page 76, and your image analysis worksheet on page 77. You can also press the link here, which will prompt you to make a copy of a Google Doc version of your image analysis tool that you can type directly on. If you press this link, you'll receive a pop-up like this, where you're able to press make a copy, and you'll receive a copy of this tool, which is a tool that we'll be using today as we look at an example of one of the two images. You can also click this link to view your student workbook pages for today's lesson, which is from page 74 to page 77. And you could also look at the complete Unit 4 student workbook PDF by clicking this link here. Okay, so now you are going to look at two images that depict La Malinche and Pocahontas. After examining each image, you will analyze them with the help of a graphic organizer. You can find the images in the graphic organizer as separate documents in this folder. So as I reviewed before, you can find these pages in your student workbook. First, we're going to look at this image of La Malinche. Let's take a moment now to pause this video and closely analyze all the different pieces of this image, looking at the top, the sky, looking at the people, their expressions, and really thinking about the things that you're noticing. Now is a good time to pause the video to take a deep look at this image in the present full screen mode. Okay, social studies scholars, so here is the version of the image analysis worksheet that you can type directly onto in the Passport to Social Studies slides. Or you can use the Google Doc PDF or the PDF that I showed you earlier in this lesson to type your observations, your reflection, and any other questions you have regarding this image. I'm going to use the Google Doc setup of this tool as I go through an example of the analysis for this image with you now. And here's a second page for you to type on in the Google Slides if you need that space. Okay, so let's take a look at this image. There's certainly some things that pop out of us and that we observe in our first glance of this image. So the first question says, what do you notice first? So it appears that La Malinche, who is right here in the center of the image, is in the presence of two important leaders who are about to meet, and it looks like they're about to shake hands. You can also see some other important pieces of this image. Behind the Native American leader on the left, there appears to be other Native people from the same tribe, including some who appear to be bowing in honor. Behind the European leader on the right, there appears to be other European people from the same country, armed and ready for battle. There are also people from both groups present in this image. There appears to be various gods as well in the top left and top right-hand corner of this image that are viewing this scene from the heavens above. We also can see the sun shining down on an empire or a new land, and it may be the Aztec Empire. Lastly, there's another detail that's really important to take a look at. There appears to be one individual who is stopping the native leader on the left from embracing the European leader on the right in a handshake, we can see this person has their arm extended to stop this native leader from fully reaching across to the European leader. Let's move on to our next section for our image analysis tool, which is reflect. As you reflect deeper and really think closely and think deeply about this image, there are certainly some things we see happening in the image. First off, Malinche is in a commanding position between Montezuma, who is the Aztec leader on the left, and Cortez, the Spanish conqueror, on the right. The background shows the capital of the Aztec Empire, and the Spanish forces led by Cortez have reached this capital with the help of Malinche, and Montezuma is face to face with their leader, Cortez. It appears both men are speaking to one another and to their respective people who are presented behind them. Cortez appears to want to embrace or shake hands with Montezuma, which the ruler's aide prevents by placing his arm in front of the embrace. This encounter appears to have been organized in part by Malinche. This image was also made to show the arrival of Cortez in the Aztec Empire and his meeting with Montezuma that was arranged in part by Malinche. She had a role in this encounter occurring, and it may lead to the fall of the Aztecs. So there are certainly some emotions that the viewer of this painting would feel as they closely read and closely analyze the different aspects of it. Certainly, one would feel emotions of intimidation or fear for the meeting of these two leaders and what may come next. And also the idea of these gods in the top left and right hand corner in the sky viewing this meeting, they appear to look angry and ready for battle, leading us to think that something dark may be ahead for these two groups of individuals. Finally, the painter of this image would want us to view this meeting between the two leaders and view the power that was instantly drained from Montezuma after failing to embrace Cortez, who would go on to conquer the Aztec Empire. And the painter also wants us to view that Malinche was the instrument by which this was accomplished, that she certainly had a role that had to do with the fall of this empire. Last but not least, the question section. So there are certainly many things that we can wonder regarding this image and some historical questions that we may want to further ponder. Something that we may be wondering about is how many soldiers and weapons did both sides have at this encounter? And what did Montezuma and Cortez say to one another during this encounter? And how did Malinche react? And what was her role in this? Or what exactly did she do to orchestrate this? How did she possibly support Cortez? And really now going to the next question of who was Malinche loyal to in this picture? She appears to be closer to the Spaniard side, so one may wonder, why is she supporting Cortez? What happened before this image that has led to her being closer to the right side of the image versus the left side? And who organized this event? Who was the person stopping the embrace between the two leaders? Who was this person over here? And then what? What do the gods in the sky represent? And what was the result of this encounter? We may also be wondering some whys. Why did Malinche organize this meeting? And why wasn't Montezuma more cautious or concerned with the motives of Cortez? And last but not least, how? How did the native Aztec people view the arrival of the Spaniards? And were the Aztecs fearful of the European weapons? These are all great questions to really consider after deeply viewing and analyzing this image. Okay, social studies scholars, you're now going to continue this process of closely analyzing, considering your observations, your reflection, and your questions for the next image, which is the baptism of Pocahontas. You're going to work on this analysis on your own, and you will continue by filling in your analysis chart, either in the Google Slides as seen here, or by clicking the Make a Link copy of the image analysis Google Doc that I showed you before, which looks like this. And you can fill in your observations on that page as well. Okay, now your mission is to complete another image analysis for the second painting in your independent activity, the one with the baptism of Pocahontas. Don't forget to make a second copy of the image analysis tool for yourself by going back to the beginning of this slide and clicking the image analysis Google Doc link, where you'll be prompted to make a second copy for yourself to save to your Google Drive. Great work today, social studies scholars. I will see you next time, and happy learning.